Baldur's Gate 3 is a game so large and so important that it's actually forced Microsoft to change a policy, because if they don't, well, yeah, it's going to be pretty damn good for Sony. This is fascinating. So Phil Spencer has had a lot of people confused recently with his Gamescom comments about the Xbox Series S. The platform is being discussed a lot more, and that's because of Baldur's Gate 3 and how the game still does not have an Xbox release date. And the reason why is because they could not get split-screen co-op running correctly on the Series S. And for some context, here's a statement that Larian had originally given to IGN. They said specifically, "We've been unable to get split-screen co-op working to the same standard on both Series X and S, which is a requirement for us to ship." And that's basically the situation. The back-of-the-box features have got to be the same. Now, this was clarified later that Xbox actually sent their technical group to work with Larian on the post-early access version of Baldur's Gate 3 to ensure stability. But with that, there was still no release date, not when the PC build came out, and now not when the PlayStation build is going to be releasing at the start of September. And that, as you can imagine, is a problem for Phil Spencer. But I'll tell you what's not a problem: today's sponsor. Ground News, an app and website that puts power in your hands, and with my link, you'll get 30% off their Vantage plan. Ground is amazing. They ingest over 50,000 news articles a day. They organize it all by story, by outlet. They break down how many sources are reporting in each topic, along with political bias and even ownership, which lets you quickly compare headlines and learn what's actually going on, which is really helped by their automatic story summary feature. It's awesome. As an example, seeing how Activision Blizzard's recent concessions that they've basically had to do, how those are being analyzed across dozens of outlets from, well, across the spectrum, is unbelievably useful for my job. And with their blind spot feature, Ground can even show you stories from outside your political norms, which helps you be better informed. Here's, say, the Prigozhin situation that is right now being undercovered by the right, and here's another story of Germany missing its climate spending targets that's underreported by the left, but a few of the sources may not be the most factual, meaning I know, don't parrot the headline, dig into the story and understand. And those are just a few examples of how Ground helps me stay informed, fight the bias of headlines that spread virally over social media and confuse the whole lot of us, and to just stay more grounded in reality. Now, if that sounds good to you, go to ground.news/Bellular, and that's where they're offering our viewers 30% off their Vantage subscription. So you can support what we do and get access to their awesome service at that link down below. All right, cheers, Ground. Okay, so initially there was a bit of a conspiracy here that, like, of course, the console war people, they always have their conspiracies, but their conspiracy was that this was all to have de facto exclusivity on the PlayStation platform, which of course isn't the case. It's that there has to be back-of-the-box feature parity between Series S and Series X. You're allowed to have different frame rates and resolutions and stuff, but not core gameplay like, you know, features. And ultimately this gave rise to a very long-burning fire that the Series X is a real problem for Microsoft and a problem for developers. This is in spite of the console allegedly making up more than half of the current gen Xbox install base. That to me is insane, and it really speaks to the magnitude of the problem that Microsoft have got on their hands here. Imagine if a significant percentage of PS5s were on a version that was just way more of a ball ache to develop for. That would suck for developers. It's like the most extreme example would be, imagine that to publish in PlayStation 5, you also had to be able to squeeze your game on a Switch. That would be hell for developers. And this isn't as bad as that, but it is bad. Here's a tweet from Alex Donaldson. The absolute most common thing this Gamescom has been devs off the record absolutely slating the Series S. It's a great value little machine, but developers despise it, man. Alex, by the way, owns RPG Site and is assistant editor at VG247, so this is him doing press stuff. If you're not aware, usually for 1 or 2 days at Gamescom, it's basically trade. It's not like, there's not really customer things going on. Usually that's when, you know, I would usually be there to try and get a publisher on board. I now don't need to do that, which is pretty sweet. But anyway, A lot of developers, talk to each other. Let's just say that. And that means we're now in a situation where both developers and players are complaining that the Series S is actually impacting video games, thinking just about how much easier life would be if they simply didn't have to build equally for it. Because at the end of the day, if everything has got to squeeze onto a Series S, that does put limitations on how far you can push a Series X. And this meant it was a little extra odd that Phil Spencer suggested that things didn't work that way in his interview, because speaking to Eurogamer, he told the site that they had no plans to drop Series S as a requirement for developers, or as a platform for releases, because it shouldn't be a problem. This is what Phil said. I don't see a world where we drop S. In terms of parity, I don't think you've heard from us or Larian that this was about parity. I think it's more the community that's talking about it. There are features that ship on X today that do not ship in S, even from our own games, like ray tracing that works on X. It's not on S in certain games. So for an S customer, they spent roughly half what an X customer bought. They understand it's not going to run the same way. And this is weird, because let's go back to that statement from Larian. Specifically, we've been unable to get split-screen co-op to work in the same standard, which is a requirement for us to ship. Okay, so what's going on? Because that does sound, Phil, awfully like some people talking about parity. Now, Phil is suggesting that parity wasn't something developers had to have between, the two different consoles in this generation. So, to try and get some clarity in this, we just went to the Xbox publishing guidelines. Here is what we found. XR-130, Xbox console families and generations, and it covers the relevant part. It says, ensure that identical game modes are offered across console types within the generation. It goes on to elaborate that this is a requirement between the S and the X. If a game does not pass that, it will fail all Xbox certification, and it cannot release on the Xbox platform. And per the changelog for that process, the last change to XR130 was in 2020. So it certainly does seem, Phil, like you do need parity between the S and the X for things like split-screen modes of play, and that's not been changed since, the console launched, which has led to this very fun Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss image. What a great image! There we go. Now that we've appreciated that image. The core thing here, though, is Phil isn't really, in this statement, he's talking about ray tracing. Now, ray tracing probably wouldn't fall under XR130, because XR130 is about identical game modes. That's a mode of play, such as the co-op that Larian were not able to get, and they themselves said was a requirement to ship. So this could be quite bad news for Larian, because XR130 doesn't appear to have changed. Unless, however, this would be bad news, unless you've just found yourself to have made one of the most highly regarded games of the year, and you could maybe leverage that fact as a bit of an exception, especially when the incentives are kind of aligned for Spencer & Co. to give you that exception. So this seems to be what Larian's CEO has done. They've actually got the co-op requirement to be dropped, and they've added the ability for Xbox players to actually cross-save onto Steam. This is pretty crazy. So here's what he tweeted. Super happy to confirm that after meeting Xbox P3, that is Phil Spencer, we found a solution that allows us to bring Baldur's Gate 3 to Xbox players this year still, something we've been working toward for quite some time. All improvements will be there, with split-screen co-op on Series X. Series S will not feature split-screen co-op, but will include cross-save progression between Steam and Xbox Series. So yes, this means there will be an Xbox release of Baldur's Gate 3 that does target 2023, providing, of course, they can get that build ready on top of, launching the PlayStation version and then staying on top of bug fixes for everything. Now, this is likely some sort of thing that was in the works by the time that Phil gave his statement. And so, while it means that this is an exception to the norm being made for Larian, it does mean that his statements on parity are true, as long as Xbox go and update those requirements, and as long as Larian acts as essentially the thin end of the wedge here. Because what's happened here, right? XR130 has not changed. We went there and we checked it. It's not changed. And Larry and are violating XR130. There is not game mode parity between versions, yet they can ship. And this is quite weird, because the next time a developer is going to walk up, they're going to be like, okay, look, we can't do this. But Larian got away with it. Can we forego this feature in the Series S and be able to publish on your consoles, Mr. Microsoft? So are Microsoft able to basically set this precedent and then say no to a developer? Or do they want the headline that actually it is, there's one rule for a very successful game and another rule for everybody else? And the answer there is no, they don't, but that is the case anyway. That's why Call of Duty has a 80-20 split for revenue. There's exceptions that have been made. We're working on a story about Xbox and Bobby, and you'll see that likely next week. But overall, this is pretty good news all around. This means that Xbox gamers get a great new game to play with, Baldur's Gate 3. It means that Larian get more sales for their fantastic game, and it means that Xbox themselves bring the game to their platform. Now, of course, console gamers still get to go and go completely insane. I'm going to implore you to read what is on screen. I don't want to say it because, the angry robot that watches all of us. But, come on, this has got to be bait, right? This person seriously is not asking for PlayStation Rosa Parks. What's going on? Anyway, it's always fun to point and laugh at the console war people because there's so much insanity that goes on. And I think another point that I just want to throw into the mix here, it does look bad, right, for Spencer and co. They are on the back foot with this generation. There's no other way about it. They have sold far fewer Xbox Series consoles than PlayStation have sold PS5s. And that's even when they have a console that's half the price of a PS5. I think they were 199 quid with a game and some Black Friday bundle or something similar, which is insane value for money. Yet still, people are going to spend the extra, 50% on the PlayStation. The market has borne that truth out. So for Spencer, the idea then that Baldur's Gate 3 gets to functionally be a PlayStation exclusive, at least in the period where it's getting most of its sales, because the developer cannot pass XR130 in their, in Microsoft's own publishing guidelines, that's really rough, because not only is it bad for getting new people in, not only is it saying this is a worse place to go for a multi-platform release, it's also making the people who are bought into the Xbox platform not as particularly happy. Before you accuse me of PlayStation bias, I do actually have both, and I use both fairly regularly. I do think they're really damn good bits of kit, and I also do think that Games Pass plus a console is actually a really good experience. Anyway, with this, we got to think about the Series S and what that could represent for gaming as a whole. It's the budget console that Spencer talks about as ensuring the entry level of the generation. This is especially as console, price cuts and mid-generation upgrades don't seem to be something that they're targeting this time around as a result of increased cost requirements from their manufacturers. That is actually something, I think it was Spencer who said, it's one of those things. He could say, oh no, we're not thinking about, an upgrade console. And maybe they are, who knows? But they're at least not putting any, public sort of hype or anything into that idea, which I suppose you wouldn't until it's a product that people can buy, because you don't want to say, hey, there's a big new thing coming. That'll just make people not buy the Series X, probably buy a PlayStation or just wait. But yeah, it doesn't seem like things are moving in the way of the mid-generation refresh. And think of it from Microsoft. They would truly be in a loopy situation if they have a console that is significantly faster than a Series X. I don't know, what do we call it? The Series XS, the Series Y, the Series Z, or just Xbox, who knows? Or the Xbox Series X Pro, if you're going to, follow Apple. Call it the Series X Pro Max, and it'll literally be a gaming console the size of a goddamn fridge. But anyway, how loopy would it be if they had a Series X Pro and still developers had to squeeze their game onto an S? That would be ridiculous. And remember, on the Series S, in terms of raw horsepower, it's actually below the Xbox One X. But of course, architecturally, performance per watt, and all of those things, it is architecturally a lot more, modern, so it does get a lot of benefits from that. But it firmly is, designed as the 1080p 60 machine, which probably is going to mean 1080p 30. But what's actually happening is we're getting simultaneously, you know, hey, we can do ray tracing, hey, we can do 4K and all these great things. PlayStation is embracing that, while Microsoft is saying, and it better scale back to this very weak console. That obviously is going to lead to what Alex Donaldson found when he was talking to game developers, and that is that they are slating the Series S. That absolutely is the case. I'm not working on any, you know, Xbox game-related stuff. Like, we're not working on that in the studio right now. But, you know, certainly moving your game from your lead platform onto another platform, yeah, that's a tricky experience. Oh God, how annoying. I suppose it's like on, you know, it's like on PC, like with PC gaming, the idea of like, okay, you post your minimum requirements, and you know, that's like a covenant between you and your players. And if you break that, you'll get bad reviews and people won't buy your game. But it's not like you cannot ship your game in PC unless it can run on, I don't know, a 1080. Right? It doesn't work like that. So that's just the sort of way that developers for the Xbox platform are being held back. And ultimately, what Larian did is they focused on PC and PlayStation, and they kind of skipped out on Xbox. It's like they were shipping the game now. It did make sense to wait for Xbox. That is a weakness for Phil, and it'll be fascinating to see how Microsoft actually navigates this space in the future. But there you go. I know the broad topic of Baldur's Gate 3 good is something that, you know, we all enjoy. In this case, it is so good and so in demand that it has allowed for the violation of XR 130. How dramatic. Okay, that's it for today's video. Of course, be sure to check out Ground News. They're an awesome platform, awesome sponsor. They help out the show. So you can check them out, the link down below. With that said, though, cheers for watching. I'll see you next time.